This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
The biggest icon in podcasting.
Welcome in, everybody, to the latest episode of Doc and Jock on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. I am the Doc, John Macaroon. Joining me, as always, my guy, Adam, the Jock Strozinski. I promise, we're only going to go maybe 6 minutes before we start fighting, just like the Americans against the Canadians. Again, guys, tonight, if you missed it, last week, Adam and I talked about our interest level for the Four Nations Cup, and clearly we gave it a shot. Now, we were subdued last week. We didn't feel like it was going to bring about anything substantial. Boy, were we wrong. Oh, my goodness. Adam and I both checked out the first contest between the United States and Canada. We're going to talk all about it because they did everything that you're supposed to do correctly to engage you in why you want to watch a competitive event. And tonight, it's the rematch, the United States against Canada. And it's expected to be dynamic, fireworks. Let's see what happens. We're also going to talk about the Tigers, Pistons, Wings, Lions, all the good stuff going on. Because I think you and I are in the same boat in regards to All-Star games. They, generally speaking, have tried a myriad of things to try and make it interesting. They tried to change up the structure, who's involved, the team concepts. But by and large, the NBA flopped when the only thing that people are talking about is a white dude that plays in the G League dunking, and he's now done it 3 years in a row where McClung has just basically made the show about himself. The NBA contest was so bad, I knew based on the structure it was going to be bad, didn't watch it, but seeing the reviews and how dumb these 8-minute games to 40 were, you didn't get a chance to really see the best players play for a long period of time. Everybody hated it. Draymond Green shit all over it. Terrible. NFL Pro Bowl is an embarrassment. Flag football, didn't watch it. NHL has been trying for ages to try and tinker and do things, but by and large, because I think what everybody understands is that these games don't mean anything, and when the game looks completely different than what actually takes place on a nightly basis, people don't really care. Now, when baseball tried to make it where the winner got home field advantage, it made it a little interesting, because nobody wants to see a basketball game played at a score of 200 to 184 where everybody's kind of walking and dunking. And then the Pro Bowl became a situation in which, I don't know if you saw on Twitter, there was a highlight back like 20 years ago where there was a tackle made and people got hurt versus now where they're doing flag football. But we must here on this podcast credit what the NHL did with this break. The Four Nations Cup has been interesting, intriguing, and when you have a situation in which, hey, the Canadians and their fans disrespected the anthem, the players and the roster, the Kachuk boys said, all right, that's what you want to do? That's how you want to get down? All right, let's throw down. And within 5 seconds, the whole country, I think united on Twitter, was like, hell yeah, let's beat some ass, which was crazy because I had just seen a rec league fight for the first time ever in my life. I'm like, these guys are playing for fun and they're punching each other out here, light checking on a Friday. And I'm like, what the heck's going on? And then on Saturday night, the players, the top end guys in this cup really, really went to town and played a great game. Dylan Larkin scored, which made everybody locally really excited. Cuz, how excited were you? Because I think you were just as excited as me. It was, everything that makes the game of hockey worthwhile has been showcased with this cup, and I think the finale, there's no chance it's not going to deliver. Hopefully the Americans win it.
It became primetime viewing in my household. Like, we worked around the baby schedule, trying to get her down. We moved everything around so we could watch that game on Saturday night. It was absolutely fantastic. They hit a home run with this. They did a really, really good job. When you look at the other major sports, right, it just doesn't have the gravity that this has. It doesn't hold the interest. It doesn't make you want to tune in. Like the NBA All-Star Game, you're like, okay, well, if I'm not doing nothing, maybe I'll put it on. The NFL All-Star Game, it's a glorified flag football game. You're watching pros out there try to pull towels out of other guys' pants. Like, that's what you're watching. I don't want to tune into that. That's not how I want to end my football season, you know? Baseball is the only one that maybe gets it a little bit close, but even I can argue the baseball All-Star game is pretty boring, and the only thing that really saves it is there's nothing going on at that time. It's in the middle of July where there's no other sports. You're in this weird little dead period. You know, from doing this podcast, it is sometimes one of the more creative times that we've got to really dig into a bag and find stuff to talk about or create things to talk about because there's just nothing going on. So Major League Baseball gets the benefit of that. And you'll tune in because it's the only thing that's sports related, unless you want to go watch pigeons fight over a piece of Wonder Bread. Now, you look at the NBA, and you talked about what Matt McClung did. Do you realize Matt McClung has basically tripled his earnings from doing and winning the slam dunk contest 3 years in a row compared to what he's earned over the lifespan of his NBA career? It is such a weird gimmick where a G League player comes in and competes with NBA players because the NBA players don't want to do it, and he annihilates them regularly. And then, like you said, you look at the actual NBA game, it's like 1 million to 1,040,000. Like, who the hell cares? Nobody's playing defense out there. When you look at what you've seen on Saturday night with the Four Nations Cup, specifically with the U.S. versus Canada, there is something about having that national pride. There is something about getting on the ice, and it really and truly, in this case, the United States is a bit of an underdog. Canada is the big bad bully, right? And you just went and you punched the big bad bully in the face 3 times in 6 seconds, and it was nuts. So it was absolutely insane to watch this game and to just, I don't know, like, I got so wrapped up in it. I was yelling at my TV. I was yelling at the Canadians. I was cheering for the United States. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. It was so good that it carried over, and I ended up watching, or earlier that day, I had watched the Sweden-Finland game. That was the 1 o'clock viewing. Like, that's how much I had worked my afternoon around this specific event. I watched the one in the afternoon. I watched the one in the evening. I'm planning to watch the finals here when the U.S. takes on Canada and hopefully gets a win. I think this has been absolutely fantastic, and I think they've hit to steal a little bit of something and to use a pun. I think they have hit a home run with the Four Nations Cup. I think this has been absolutely fantastic. It's been so much fun to watch, and you see these guys who they're excited to go out there and play. They want to be out there. They want to represent their nation. They want to sit there and throw down with Canada. I do think that there were some missteps done, though. I do think this could get better. I think you can make this a much more interesting competition. And I've got a couple of ideas here. I think with the Four Nations Cup, I like that it was pared down to 4, and I feel like this was a bit of a test run. If we look at what's going to happen next year with the NHL, they'll be in the Olympics, and the hockey players, the NHL players, will be competing in the Olympics. So whatever this isn't going to happen. So it gives you an extra year to really kind of tweak it and get it right and get it perfected. I think you need to include Russia. You need to figure out some way to include Russia, and you have to include the Czech Republic. I feel like the Czechs and the Slovaks have so many good, talented hockey players. For them to be left out is really a disservice to them. Also, Russia produces the 3rd most NHL players. There's no reason that they shouldn't be in this tournament. So I think you go with 6 teams, right? And you've got the 6 best hockey nations, and you basically split them up into groups of 3. You play a round robin, where you'll end up playing the 2 teams in your division, and then you have 1 crossover game. That's where it gets a little bit weird, because if you get Canada and Russia in that one division, and then you've got to either play Canada or Russia in that crossover game, you could take an L. But, it is what it is. So you have the 2 games in your division, then you have the 1 crossover game. Top 2 teams from each division get to go on to play in what essentially is a semifinal. And you would do it similar to how they do in soccer, where you've got the A group, and you've got the B group, and then you've got the A1, you've got the A2, you got the B1, B2. So the A1 would play the B2, and then the B1 would play the A2, and then you would just kind of cross and see what happens. I feel like that would be a much more accurate depiction of some of the best hockey on the planet, and you get those 6 nations, and I think it would be that much better. But this was absolutely fun. This has been so much fun to watch. The other night I watched U.S. and Sweden. Unfortunately, the U.S. did not win that game. I did not get a chance to catch the Canadians versus Finland. Canadians tore apart Finland, but it is what it is. But I think this has been absolutely outstanding. I think this has been so well done, and you have local ties because as a Red Wings fan, you've got Dylan Larkin in it. The game against Sweden, you had Lucas Raymond in it. So you've got guys that you root for playing on these national teams, and it gives you a little bit of a rooting interest there as well. So I want to applaud the NHL. I think this has been so well done. Usually all-star games absolutely suck, and this has been awesome to watch.
Any concerns about the injury to key members of the United States team against Canada? Because I think that once Canada got punked, it was pretty clear that they're going to show up tonight, and I want the Americans to win. I'm invested. I think that it was great. Clearly, Dylan Larkin, with his ties to USA Hockey and what he means to the Red Wings, I just thought his goal to help the Americans win 2-1 was special. A nice defensive lapse by the Canadians. He skates up the ice. And I'll say this, too, just on a side note. Rec hockey is pretty fun. There's some dudes that are a little overweight. They could skate. Just the goalies were solid. It was fun. It was out in Troy, the Buffalo Wings Center there. The girls did open skate, and I was like, okay, after 45 minutes of them like trying to hug a cone and try to get around, I was like, I'm getting bored of this. I can't, this is scary. I don't like this. So I just kind of went to the rink next door and kind of watched these dudes get after it, and they took it seriously, and it was hilarious, man. This one guy got mad at the other defender and just kind of stood there and just punched him right in the face, and it was like, okay, everybody was kind of like, you give that guy like, oh, this is that guy kind of thing, and it was hilarious. But they could skate, man. There's some talent that they were skating well. A lady was playing too. They could skate, move around. You could see the difference between like skilled skaters versus the ones that couldn't. But there were dudes with mullets, and I was like, this is kind of entertaining, and had a good time with it. And I could see where the NHL is going to get a little boost, and people love hockey around here. And I could, now with the Wings playing so much better, it's just a great experience because it resembles competitive hockey. That's all you got to do is make it competitive. And I hate when people say, well, just throw $5 million at the winner for an all-star game. Look, if you don't want to be competitive, then just don't have the game. Just make it like a content symposium where, a lot of people where people have it where wrestling fests where you go, or a convention where it's just an NBA convention where you have panels, you have different teams talking, different guys will come up there, like each team's representative will go up there for 20 minutes and talk or do a podcast. You don't have to have a game. You could just have a symposium where a lot of content's filmed, live stuff, some interesting stuff that people talk about, or some debates where you have a Cade Cunningham chatting it up with a member of the Warriors, or LeBron talking to Cade, or a watch along where a good game happens where you go, hey, let's relive LeBron dropping 25 on the Pistons and talking through it. You can do so many good content things or competitive things that don't involve the game. So I just think that's where people lost their attention. But the NHL credit, we downplayed it way too much. I thought that, in seeing what it could be and how people do get passionate about American, when you slap USA on anything, people care, especially when it's competitive. So I'm very happy that the NHL has this, and next year's the Olympics. So it's a little bit, hopefully, a boost for the Red Wings coming off of the break, and we'll see how it happens now. As we enter the second half for the Wings and the Pistons, I think both are keeping it so that we can keep talking about them. We can keep have opportunities to see what they did. We saw the Pistons and what they're able to do at the deadline, adding a reserve player. Now you have the Red Wings and what they're going to do potentially. Maybe they'll add, maybe they'll make a decision. And I think there's an opportunity for both squads, the Pistons and Red Wings, to have an opportunity to make the postseason. Which team are you kind of seeing has the edge for the postseason? I do think that both have a chance, but I think maybe the Pistons, maybe right now, if they can continue to shoot if they play defense and lock it down and they get a little bit healthier, I think that the Pistons have a more realistic chance to be able to be a contender to win a playoff series in my mind. Am I wrong? And how do you think the second half is going to shake out for both squads?
So looking at where the teams kind of rank right now as far as standings go, if the Pistons get into – if playoffs were to start right now, Pistons would be taking on a very good New York Knicks team. I don't know if they've got enough to get by the Knicks. Just kind of looking at what I've seen from the Knicks this year, looking at some key stats, I just don't know if the Pistons have enough to get over that hump. I think they'll make it interesting, but I don't know if they've got enough to get over that hump. Now, the Red Wings would take on a very good Washington team. Right now, the Red Wings are that last wild card team that would get in, and they would end up taking on a very good Washington Capitals team. And this is the difference between hockey and basketball, right? Basketball, you have guys, you have stars who can take over games and take over entire series. Same thing can happen in hockey. I just don't know if the Pistons necessarily have a guy like that on their roster. Whereas with the Red Wings, you just need a goaltender to get hot, and he can steal you around in the playoffs. And the Red Wings do a very good job with their power play. So they've got a specialty unit that is tops in the league. You've seen what they've been able to do since Todd McClellan's come in. They've rattled off 2 7-game win streaks since he's taken over as the head coach, and they look like a much more competent team. Now, I do think that they do have some lapses on their defense, and I think their defense is a bit of a we'll say a bugaboo for them. And Washington would likely expose some of that. But if you get a goaltender and a guy like Cam Talbot or Alex Lyon who gets hot and is able to stand on his head, they could steal you a series. I think right now, if I had to bet on one of these teams, I would put my money on the Red Wings. And it's just because of the weird nature of playoff hockey. It's the weird nature of a little bit of puck luck and getting a goaltender who all of a sudden gets hot at just the right time. I think the Pistons have a very good team. And if we're talking about how far along each team is on its road to being a complete product, I think the Pistons might actually be a little bit closer than the Red Wings. It's just in the NBA, you generally have 2 to 5 teams that really separate themselves from everybody else. And those teams are very, very difficult to beat. And then you've kind of got everybody else who's just kind of bunched up in this group. And if you look at, just go look at standings, you really do have, I think, 4 teams in between both conferences. And then everybody else is just kind of this near 500 or slightly above 500 grouping. And that's kind of where the Pistons fall. And they're right in that group. And I just don't know if they have enough right now to get over that hump and be a team that can really make some noise in the playoffs. So I'm going to go with the Red Wings. If I have to bet right now, I think the Red Wings, just because of the nature of what you get in playoff hockey and how you can have a goaltender all of a sudden heat up for no apparent reason other than it's April, and they're able to figure it out, and they're able to stand on their head, and they're able to win you multiple games back to back. I will pick the Red Wings. Look, speaking of Chris Ilitch teams, we're finally done with Bregman watch. I want to get your reaction. Was it a bit of a relief when you seen what he signed for with the Red Sox? Or do you feel like Scott Harris maybe missed out on adding that third baseman, adding that Gold Glove third baseman to this roster? Would have been arguably the second best player on this team. Or when you look at the contract details, you're like, whew, we dodged a bullet here.
Yeah, look, it's weird because there is a personal relationship between Bregman and AJ Hinch.
Yep.
So, to me, probably my thoughts are far-fetched, but I just want to share what I'm thinking on it. I look at it like, all right, in contract negotiations, you kind of know where people are at. So I do believe it would have made sense that the representative for Bregman tells the Tigers the most important thing is average annual value. Clearly, he signed for 3 years and $40 million per. So years could have been sacrificed based on how much money upfront or deferred was going to be negotiated. So I feel like the Tigers wanted to maybe more put out that they made an offer more than their actual ability to go get the player. Because in the end, if you build when there is no cap on Major League Baseball, there is a number that a player's worth. And I don't think Bregman's worth $40 million. But I think the value of sending the message to the rest of the organization, sometimes it's a tax for sucking. And
it's almost like when they went and got Pudge. They overpaid for Pudge. It's one of those deals and next thing you know, you were able to go out and get better players.
Yeah, it's a signal like, hey, yeah, we're going to overpay this guy, and he's the beneficiary of only being worth 25, but we're going to pay him 40. But the message it would have sent to actually, and see, this is what I don't like about sports, where you get credit for failure. Like, I don't go out here and go, yeah, congrats, I now know that Chris Ilitch is going to spend. That's the floor. That's the first thing I expect is go out and spend average amount of money because that gives you more of a chance to win. I think Bregman would have helped. I am more of a, yeah, it's good. It's nice to know that they would have spent 170. Now you know that potentially is available, $40 million or so you can play with to add talent, a right-handed bat at the deadline. But to me, at this point, I'm more of a, did you get the player or not? If you targeted him, why did you lose out to a Boston team? And partly it's due to the money, and partly it's due to the concerning nature of Comerica Park. I think that park does not make people happy where they go, you know what, if I hit and I rake at Boston, I can opt out after 2 years. I can make another $200 million with another deal. Whereas Bregman, people probably told him, you go to Comerica, your home run numbers are down 20%, and that's going to probably correlate to a 40% reduction in what you could earn. And so the park cost, I think, the Detroit Tigers, Alex Bregman. And I'm disappointed. It's frustrating because it was built up like, we've built this offseason to go around Alex Bregman. So when you don't get him, then to put out with your people, well, congratulations to us. We were willing to make a serious offer, and look at us. We're willing. Well, okay, yeah, that's what we talked about 3 years ago. But bottom line, if you wanted to show that you were serious, pay him the $40 million. Pay him 3 years, $40 million. Give him, okay, say, okay, you want $40 million, here's 41. But in the end, they did put and we talked about it too, that, hey, there's a serious number that you have, and most people are not going to budge because then you look desperate and you're going to overpay, and they don't want to give sunset years and they don't want to do that. But if you're Bregman, I think you took the best deal for years and opt-outs and things like that. But for the Tigers, it's disappointing because you still have that need for the right-handed bat. I think that's the hole you have, and then the infield looks a little bit rough in terms of defensive prowess. I like the pitching staff. I like the way the pitching staff is going to work with Comerica. It fits nicely. I think you're going to get nice development from Job and from having Flaherty back, and you have a top three that led by Skubal is nice. But right-handed bat, you're now in the hope phase. You hope that maybe Spencer Torkelson will figure out how to be consistent as a hitter and live up or as close as possible. But for me, I'm not impressed by losing out on Bregman. It feels like loss. It feels like, okay, I think you and I maybe are in the same kind of boat. We look at objective, and did you complete the objective or did you fail in the objective? Now, there's a bunch of other stuff that you can rank and talk and say, yeah, it's good. I'm happy that the money was there if you wanted it. But at the same token, bottom line, I'm frustrated because it feels like you lost. And you didn't have really, because it dragged out so long and you knew this guy, it feels like you're left out in the lurch. And to me, and maybe it's being fatalistic, but I feel like you were the pawn in the agent's game going, well, the Tigers are offering this. He goes back to the Red Sox. Well, the Tigers are doing this, and they might give 6 years. They might give 7 years. They might do da-da-da. And the Red Sox are like, okay, we're going to go from 35 to 36. He goes back to the Tigers. Look, we're going to get da-da-da. It feels like the Tigers were never serious as the winner. Felt like they were Team B, used to be the information given back to the team that Bregman wanted, whether it be Houston or the Red Sox. I never truly got upset because I never felt like that I was always feeling like Bregman was not going to come here because the money wasn't going to be there. Well, the money's there, but I just feel like it was a loss. Like you lost out on your target. And I don't think the Tigers are as good without Bregman as they could have been with him. So I would have just made the move and maybe sacrifice the true value of what the player is for the PR for, hey, this guy, we're serious about going out and getting the talent that can help this baseball team, even win, just get to the ALCS so we have a chance to compete. But I felt like the Scott Harris's message was, hey, we beat a team. I felt like the message was prepared to say, hey, if we get him, great. We wanted him. But at the same token, when you lose out on them, you can't ignore the fact that you courted them for 7 months. So It's a PR spin game. They spun it well, very well, but winners win. And if you target someone, the art of the deal is I want the best players on the team that help this team win games. And I just feel disappointed. How do you view it? And because I think by the time we started talking about it at the tail end, we were all fatigued like, dude, just call it off or stop because you're starting to look desperate.
So for me, it's a little bit two-sided, right? So I'm excited that they're not paying him what was reported that they offered him, right? Because I feel like for what he actually is, and like you said, for his numbers at Comerica, that was going to be a bit of a painful contract, especially if you got into years 4, 5, 6. If they did the 7-year deal that was possibly reported, it was going to be a tough deal. Now, what I find to be a little bit frustrating is you did lose a guy who would have been your second best player on your roster, would have filled a position of need at third base. And like you said, you're sending a message to your ball club and you're sending a message to Major League Baseball. We're here and we're looking to win. And that's the one thing, it's the big issue I've had with Chris Ilitch with both of his teams, with both the Red Wings and both the Detroit Tigers, is it just feels like they don't want to put the money where their mouth is. There's a lot of talk about, oh, we're going to contend for playoff spots. We're going to be a team that's building and we're going to be a tough out for somebody. But then when it comes time to actually pony up the cash, they don't really pony up the cash. They're not really going out investing in top name free agents. They're not really going out spending money on some of their own guys who deserve it. You look at Tarek Skubal. I get he's got 2 years left of control. Totally understand it. But you're going to have to really sell me that Chris Ilitch in 2 years isn't going to lose him because he doesn't want to pay him what the market value is going to be or what he's asking for. That could be obviously it's going to be a discussion for later on down the road. But I feel like in this case with Bregman, they were looking for something specific in their deal, especially if they were going to sign a long-term deal, and that was an opt-out clause. And it sounds like the Tigers weren't willing to put that opt-out clause in. And again, that becomes frustrating to me when you could have the second best player on your roster and filling that position of need of third base. You give the guy an opt-out clause. You say, cool, we're going to give you a 6-year deal. Obviously, the AAV is not the same as what the Red Sox are giving, but you can structure a contract however you want. So that first year, he's getting a little bit more. And if he rakes in your yard, cool, he can opt out. And then what's the big deal? You're not on the hook the next couple of years for that contract. You know what I'm saying? I think including those opt-out clauses, I think twofold. It allows Bregman to go out there and really try to perform at his absolute best, while at the same point giving you a chance to get out of a contract that could be a bit of a bitter pill to swallow later on. So for me, it's a little bit frustrating. Relief that they didn't sign him to a contract that was similar to what the Red Sox are giving him, because I don't feel like he's necessarily worth that. But at the same point, I'm frustrated because I don't feel like the Tigers are ever going to invest the way that they need to invest to be a team that can contend for a World Series, for a team that can really start to go the distance, and a team that you can get behind and feel proud to be behind. To me, it feels like it's a lot of penny pinching, and it's a lot of trying to get cute with numbers, trying to obscure what's really going on, and that's that the Tigers just don't necessarily want to play ball with the big boys. They want to be treated like this weird little mid-tier team. And to me, they're one of the best teams. They're one of the most proud teams in baseball, and they just don't conduct themselves that way. And that's where a lot of that frustration comes from.
And I think where you and I disagree maybe, or where maybe the fans and the organizations disagree a little bit, is that once you show success, like you get to that point, it feels like the level of investment has been lighter than what fans expect. And I think it's the same way with the Lions, and we'll talk about the Lions offseason here in a few minutes. But it kind of feels like, okay, you're the Tigers, and you just come off of a surprising playoff run where you beat the Astros and you're competitive against Cleveland in your own division. And you go out and you sign an individual pitcher over the age of 35 who has an injury history and now is going to be behind. The first announcement that's made at spring training is Cobb is not available. He's got a hip situation.
And this dude was looking to retire.
Exactly.
You paid him a
that
fortune.
when he first started working out the hip, it said, what the hell? We didn't want to do all this work. Why are you rotating? Why are we flexing? The hip was like, oh, hell no. No. And it flared up. And it was like, okay. And then you sign another pitcher from the Yankees who basically exclusively throws changeups. So the idea is that the organizations are doing this steady Eddie approach of going from first gear to second gear and then second gear to third gear. But once your team showcase that you have a world-class manager and you have pitchers that can carry you and you have young cats that are developing, I think you could have invested more in this offseason. That's why I think the offseason grade for me is B-. I felt like you could have did so much more to be able to go and take the next step from second gear to fourth gear and make it competitive. But these organizations, remember too, they like this steady approach, and the phrase that they all use here locally is build the right way. Don't take cheating steps, because when you're wrong, when you do it that way, when you focus a little bit more on free agent acquisitions, then you end up maybe putting yourself behind. And I just think that basically there just has to be a healthier medium besides light guys in their 30s with the Tigers and older cheap guys with the Lions that are injured. I think that the identification of free agents just has to be, right now they're 44% aggressive. They need to be like 64% aggressive. Get guys that are a little bit more impactful and not guys that are a little bit on the tail end that you identify as being numerically, relevant. And that's where I think the disconnect is that I think that if fans were general managers, they would go out and get somebody a little bit younger, a little bit more ready to help the team right now and then spend the money. But when you have a budget, unfortunately, cuz we can't spend the Tigers' money. We can't spend the Illich money. We could do it easily, and maybe he would get mad at us. But at the same token, I think the wins would have been there. And I think if you have good general managers and you go out there and get the best players, I think that offsets any disappointment you may feel with failure. Because now if the Tigers fail, it points right back to what you did from October to February was not enough. And that's why you're not going to win versus Cleveland and versus other teams that are stacking up and trying to rebuild. So that's just how I view it. I just think that the rebuilds could be sped up with a little bit more aggression in the decisions in free agency. The drafting has been pretty solid across the board by all squads. It's weird in that universally it's like all the management in town, free agency has become like the curse word. It's like a sick word. Free agent outside, we didn't tap them. We didn't. It's like a tax. You know what I mean? It's kind of like one of those deals where they look at free agents like, well, we didn't develop them, so we don't want to pay them. It's a risk. Well, guess what? Most free agents that are good are going to cost you. It's going to be the value of putting some asses in seats. And that's where I think, all these guys are savvy with numbers and analytics, but I think they miss out on the fact that, hey, you put some asses in some seats, that makes some money. You put some pizzazz in your team, some situations where I think the PR is more valuable and the money generates more when you have players that people like. That's how I view it. And I think that, to me, I haven't gone to a Red Wings game yet this year, not one for the Pistons. Soon, I think probably one each will attend, but marquee names favor the Lions right now in terms of guys that you want to see. Maybe Skubal now is the guy for the Tigers, but I think that with these organizations, they got to just be a little bit more aggressive with their free agent acquisitions. Don't be so scared. If you're good at being a drafter, you also kind of got to be good at being a free agent evaluator, and that's got to be part of your evaluation. Like, great, you can be a great, high school prospect evaluator, have a good team, but if you can't target the guys that are already good and established and figure out what to pay them, that doesn't make you. That's a huge diminishing factor in my evaluation of you as a talent evaluator, and I'm wondering what the next step is going to be for these teams. But it's going to be interesting, which is good. I think that the Tigers' ceiling is a little bit higher than what people think, but not as high as guys like you and I who have big goals for this. And I think they could have did better. They could have made much more effective moves. Now, did you think of a plan B besides Bregman? Was there names that you thought that the Tigers should have gotten? Because all the other guys that they're talking about now are just like replacements that, like the Arenado, I don't want to talk about. Other guys that are backups, I don't think are in a situation where I wanted them. Maybe you could have went after a pitcher, maybe another hitter that could have been here. Was there another name that you felt like they could have maybe also had a backup plan to go and get?
I feel like they put all their eggs in the Bregman basket, and it drug out for so long. How long did Bregman watch go on for? Like 6 weeks, 7 weeks?
The whole time. Right away, once the season ended, everyone said this was one of the biggest guys to go get.
That was the guy. And I don't feel like there was ever a backup plan. I didn't have a backup plan, and I don't think Scott Harrison necessarily had a backup plan. I felt like it was Bregman or bust, and it busted. They didn't get him, and now you're kind of here. So to me, it was a bit of a miscalculation. I don't know if Scott Harris felt like they were for sure going to get him or not, but I think when this starts in the offseason and then it continues and it goes into spring training and you still don't have an answer, like at a certain point, you just got to pivot. Like you got to know. And at a certain point, you got to know what you're being used for. And that's what happened here. Like you were used in this entire situation. You weren't getting him, and it became more and more evident as the weeks wore on that you weren't getting him. So you needed to do something else. You needed to get out of this. And look, maybe they feel like what they've got in their minor league system, and maybe they feel like what they've got on their roster is going to be just fine. I don't know. Maybe. I just feel like you missed a prime opportunity to send a message to your ball club, and you missed a prime opportunity to send a message to the rest of the baseball world that you're actually here to play. You're not going to do some weird pitching trickeration to be able to get into the playoffs. Then when you get in the playoffs, you're going to do this. No, you're a serious ball club, and you're here. You want to sit at the big boy table. Right now, I feel like the Tigers are sitting at the kiddie table. And it's frustrating. It's absolutely frustrating. And I think when you look at other organizations in the area, right, you look at what the Red Wings did in their offseason, kind of felt something similar. It kind of felt underwhelming. The Pistons were in a weird spot where they fired their head coach, paid him a buttload of money to get out of here, brought in a new general manager, and that new general manager was like, look, we're going to kind of take things slow, so just bear with us. And they stuck to their plan, and I think they've got a good plan because it's starting to work. I think when you look at the Detroit Lions, we've been pounding on the table for big, impactful moves, I think for 3 seasons now. And you can see the growth of the team. And yeah, it's a very good team. I think we both believe that the Detroit Lions aren't necessarily where they need to be to get over the hump. And you can say the same thing about the Detroit Tigers. Tigers made some okay moves this offseason. I don't think there was anything that was overwhelming. If anything, it was pretty underwhelming. If they have the ability to duplicate what they did last year, you'll be in the playoffs, but I don't know if you get much further than you did last year, and it kind of, I feel like the Tigers and the Lions right now are mirroring each other, where you both have a little bit of an underwhelming offseason. You go into the season and you might be able to get as far as you got, but there's no guarantees that you get on that playoff run and you get to where you were last year or the year prior. And I think for a team like the Lions, you've got to really prioritize a couple of position groups that you need to address, because you could start to fall by the wayside. And I feel like same thing with the Tigers. Tigers, young team, but if you're not careful, you could definitely fall by the wayside. What are 3 important position groups that you feel like the Detroit Lions need to address, and not maybe pull a Scott Harris move where you just kind of put all your eggs in one basket and you just kind of let that basket sail down the river, and hopefully it gets to its destination and doesn't get swallowed up or crushed by something? What does Brad Holmes have to do this offseason to make sure that your Detroit Lions are the team that are actually playing in the Super Bowl next year and win it?
Yeah, no, it's one of those deals with the Lions. This is a big offseason. It's one of those deals where you're starting to see the creme de la creme in the NFC start to make noise, and you're staring at the Commanders, who have their franchise guy, the Eagles, who potentially are going to have to go through some rebuilds and make decisions on guys that they have to maybe pay and reward or decide on. And you also, in speaking and looking at it, you have to pay attention to your division. Like Ben Johnson said, I want to compete against you guys. and he has all the secrets, he has all the knowledge, and he went to a roster that has a quarterback that was drafted number 1. So I view it as the Lions have an offense that can compete, even though they can weather some changes with the coaching staff, and maybe even for the better in regards to philosophical ideas in game. So first things first, always in the trenches, it's where everybody will always look. I think the offensive line did not live up to the billing in 2024. They were billed as all-world number 1, and they played like a top 15 offensive line, but the left side really, when you dig into the tape, struggled at some times against some competition, and the Bills took advantage of Frank Ragnow to a degree that I'm sure when he watches that game, he still has nightmares about what the Bills' defensive line did to him, and then the Washington Commanders just picked on Graham Glasgow. So to me, 2 areas you just have to address. You have to answer the question finally, who's going to play opposite of Aiden Hutchinson? You can't have that be an answer for 5 years. Like, you know, he's in his 4th year now. Aiden Hutchinson's going to be dominant, hopefully, when he comes back healthy. You got to upgrade the defensive line and the interior, too. Aleem McNeil's not going to be who Aleem McNeil normally is until the midway through the season. Guys, I know that everybody thinks that everybody's Adrian Peterson. They all come back from ACLs and are just like, yeah, no big deal. And they come back 5 months later, and they're the same guy. Everybody's different, and you're not going to get the same. You probably are going to get a very high level, better than most, but these injuries are significant, and they take time, and the Lions don't want to rush anybody back, especially with the investment that you made in Aleem McNeil. So it's a fair question that a lot of analysts have said is that, yeah, the Lions had multiple guys come back and had to go on IR, but what are they going to look like when they come back? What's that going to look like? So first and foremost, the defensive line. 1, 2, some depth and starters along the offensive line. And then 3, you're going to have to address what's going to go on behind Terry and Arnold at cornerback, because Carlton Davis, I think, is going to be a Jet, or somebody else is going to look to make him a priority. If you franchise tag him, it's going to cost $20 million for the season. I don't think they want to do that. I think they'll make a competitive offer, but he's going to get anywhere between $15 and $18 million per season. So I think you can allocate maybe a draft pick there or another free agent that's similar, and you're going to have to address the cornerback spot. Otherwise, you're pretty good at wide receiver, good at running back, good at safety, decent at linebacker. You could lose Derek Barnes, but ranking it, defensive line, offensive line, cornerback. And I think that the biggest question mark that caused this Lions team not to thrive in the postseason is your defense wasn't championship caliber. Like, your offense made mistakes, critical mistakes, but still scored a shit ton of points. If your defense is locked down and can weather stuff, the injuries just, it's an excuse because you have to make it. Once Amik Robertson went down, that was the proverbial bullet in the forehead that ended your season. It was done. Like, he was a heart and soul. Like, he was a guy that was just, metaphorically, just a guy that was a thumper, a guy that overextended himself based on his height and just shut down based on, nobody's expectation that he could limit Justin Jefferson. And then you go into the postseason, within 3 plays, he's laying on the ground with a broken arm. It was like the football god said, hey, good. You guys are good, but not good enough yet to win the Super Bowl. Hey, you still got some demons to overcome. Hey, you still have way too many warts that you guys did not address properly or could not address properly, that if they would have won against the Commanders, they would have got destroyed against the Eagles in an NFC championship game. So I think that the trenches, you got to upgrade because it's simple as this. The blueprint's there now. Hey, how do you rattle Jared Goff? You smack him in the head. You take your linebacker and you run his ass into Jared Goff. And Jared Goff was not the same, whether he was concussed or rattled. Once he got popped in the helmet, Luvu did his job, and boom, Goff was rattled, and he was not the same. The football was spraying all over the place, and that was a situation in which you took advantage of a weakness in the turnovers, and that's what it was. Where are you looking at it? Do you think that, and I'm also curious what, one, your assessment is of the needs, and which avenue do you get it? Because I could see maybe free agency going where, you know what, you target a nice lineman and upgrade the offensive line with guys that are proven and pay them, and then draft the cornerback and I'm drafting defense and I'm paying for offensive linemen, because that's a tough position. I think that, we looked at the highest end guy at Trey Smith but that number is going to be super high at over $20 million a season. But there's a bunch of guys that you could bring in as well. So I'm paying the free agents aggressively on the offensive line, and I'm developing and trying to figure out who Kelvin Shepard likes on defense in the draft.
Yeah, I like where your head's at with all of it. So for me, number one is defensive line, specifically the edge. You need to find somebody to play opposite of Aiden, just like you said. I think if you can get him a running mate, all of a sudden, Aleem in the middle of that defense looks really, really good, and you can pretty much throw anybody else alongside Aleem, and they're going to look fantastic. So you got to go address that edge rusher opposite of Aiden. After that, it's offensive line. I've been very vocal about my feelings on Taylor Decker. I think you need to shore up that offensive line. You've seen it. Jared Goff is a much better player when he has more time. He has more time. He can get through all of his reads. He can get through the entire playbook, and he can get the ball downfield, and he's incredibly accurate when he has that time. And then cornerback, like you said, you don't really know what you got as far as cornerback goes going into the season, right? Like Terrion Arnold, you're expecting to take a monster step forward, but there's no guarantee. You look at Ernest Rakestraw, his rookie season was cut short because of an injury. So you don't really even know what you've got with him, and he's missed a ton of developmental time. Amik Robertson, I feel like he really grew into his own at the back end of that season, but can you count on that? I'm not sure. Carlton Davis, he's going to be a free agent, so you'd have to look at bringing him back. So I feel like cornerback is a position that you need to address. So the way I would do this is if you're not going to go out and you're not going to make the blockbuster trade for a guy like Myles Garrett, you're going to draft your end and you're going to draft your edge rusher in the draft. You're going to go use the draft for that. I feel like your offensive line, you can get a lot of good talent in that second round. You can add a offensive tackle or an offensive guard in that second round. So I'd go draft again for that, and then I would look at free agency for cornerbacks. Now, I'd have to sit down and look at what is actually available, but I might do the same thing I did for Carlton Davis, where you go out and maybe you make a trade for a cornerback, or you try to sign somebody through free agency. Offensive tackle, you can also use you can also go the free agent route as well. But I feel like you need to invest with this upcoming draft. You need to invest heavily on your defense. Specifically along that defensive line and those back four guys. Cornerback, really and truly, is a position that I feel like you can never have enough guys, and you constantly have to keep reloading and adding to that position because they get hurt all the time. Carlton Davis is a really good player. Carlton Davis looks like he's made of glass because he misses large chunks of every single season. And you look at this year, when you needed him the most, he was hurt. You look at Amik Robertson. He had a really nice season. Went out and really and truly earned himself some good money and a nice new contract. And what happened? When you needed him most, he got hurt. Ernest Rakestraw had the opportunity to really take over and solidify himself as a starting cornerback on this team because guys were going down, and he also went down. So you can never have enough cornerbacks. You need to really load up on those. So look, if you can pick one up in free agency or via a trade, spend some draft capital on one. I don't mind you bringing in 2 or 3 corners to help fill out your roster. I do think you need to add some meat and potatoes up front, though. You need to get some big uglies on both sides of the ball, and Aiden Hutchinson needs a running mate ASAP. We've been screaming about it now for 2 years. You got to make it happen. Has to happen.
Yeah, and a closing thought here, it seems like you've taken the stance that a lot of people have when you heard Darius Slay clap back at Amon-Ra St. Brown going, man, how are you guys on his Big Play Slay podcast, which is decent, and he's like, why is everybody clapping saying that they're close to the Eagles? We got the ring. Why are y'all coming up at us? We're standing here at the mountaintop. And I think that's what's funny about sports and fans is that they try to find so many defensive ways to explain that they lost, and Amon-Ra St. Brown is so competitive, and I understand that mindset where you're just like, yeah, we lost, but let's get them next time. And it's that idea of, yeah, it's you want to just get back out there and spin it positive, but I think that I'm sensing that just based on all the chirping you're hearing from the Lions and all the podcasts that they do. And yeah, I'm going to say this. From the Matt Patricia era till today, they're doing about 45%, 50% more media. Amon-Ra has a weekly podcast that makes news. Players are appearing. What's funny is, and I can share with you guys behind the scenes, which is funny to me, and I don't want to be judgmental, but I did an interview request for Brad Holmes to see if he'd come on the podcast, and I just said 15 minutes. I don't ask for like an hour and a half of these guys' time. Like, I don't think that even I can sustain a conversation like Joe Rogan for 2.5 hours because it's just tough with scheduling. So 15 minutes. They said no. And then yesterday, you always scroll on YouTube to see what's going on and all the fun stuff. And I see he sat down for 45 minutes with a local reporter on Channel 4. I say to myself, okay, we have a bigger, the number of views that they get versus us, it's weird. And maybe it's because it's television and there's a metric there, but the YouTube views, we get more on the podcast than they got. And she sat down with them for 45 minutes. And my wife is funny. He's like, yeah, look at her and look at you. You think he wants to sit down with you? And I said, that's funny, but it's one of those deals where I know that all the questions were softball and it was kind of funny. That he's talking about, just things that are positive and all that kind of stuff. I get it. But if you're doing media, and I do think that Brad Holmes took a much more subdued tone after falling back this year, but I like it big picture wise, I like the discourse that is coming out. I don't think that it's as detrimental. I don't think that the reason why the Lions lost to the Commanders is because of bulletin board material. I just thought that the injuries at the worst time hit the Lions, and they didn't play good football. Mano a mano, if they played a good football game, the game would have been more competitive. I don't think the talk, because the Lions have good football players, and confident players talk. And I understand, and it's the age-old adage, because when I grew up in sports, it was crazy because I could never decide. My biggest sports debate is not in the NFL. My biggest sports debate was the antics of these two tennis players. I love the beauty and artistry of Pete Sampras. Like, the man eloquently moved around the court flawlessly, big serve and volley. He made the game look easy, didn't talk. Like, he'd just be like, I'm out here, I'm going to blow a serve 130 miles an hour past you. On the biggest point, second serve, it's just going to go by you. And good luck dealing with it. He ended up being one of the biggest major winners of all time. Classy, Wimbledon white. And I was like, I think I could be like him. Well, then somebody else comes along, and it's like, oh, that guy's fucking cool too. And that was Andre Agassi. And everybody comes in, and Agassi's coming in like, I'm going to fucking nail you to the cross, Pete Sampras. I think I'm better than you. The rebel with Cannon, the guy that was just like, hey, look at the hair, look at the bandana. And all the people loved him. And he just blew up. And then his game got to the point where he would compete with Sampras. And it got to be a nice rivalry where whenever they would play at the U.S. Open, I don't care what was going on in the world, I was sitting down for 4 hours. Let's go. The big serve versus the big return. The flamboyant guy versus the quiet, just show up with your game and see what happens. I love both. Like, that's what's fun about sports, is that the best guys just do it. Like Tom Brady, yeah, he's vocal, but they just have the talent to back it up. But I respect what you're saying in that the Lions probably would benefit from a little bit less talking in 2025 and a little more doing, because you took a step back. And yeah, the injuries are a factor, but I respect the openness that they have. They shared a lot of things, and I don't think it was too detrimental, because I got to know a couple of them, and Amik Robertson, probably with the most open podcast that you're going to see around, sharing his insights, and DJ Reader sharing insights. It's a good thing. That's what I think the reason why podcasts have blown up, is that people want to listen to other people talk. But what is it that bugs you about the Lions and maybe Amon-Ra saying, hey, let's get after them in 2025 with a healthy team? Why wouldn't you think that the Lions healthy could compete against the Eagles? They have built a good offense, a good stable talent level based on draft picks. I think that, yes, everybody's going to respect the Eagles. They're the champs, clearly. But at the same token, when you're a competitor, you want to say, hey, when you have a podcast, you want to say, hey, yeah, let's bring them on. Opener, put us against them. Let's see what happens. What's your beef with all the talking? You're talking about talking? What's bugging you?
I just feel like this team at a certain point, ended up started reading their own press clippings. They kind of got high on their own supply. And there was more time spent talking about opponents, more time talking about what they were going to do, more time spent basically trying to be this face of the league. The whole time running around acting like you got a chip on your shoulder. I just feel like you have to go back and you got to start putting work in. You need to go back and you need to be that team, that hungry team. I'm not saying that they're not hungry, but I'm just saying there was more of a workman-like attitude when this team was 9-8 and they just missed the playoffs and they had to go into Lambeau and beat Green Bay just to kind of prove to the rest of the world, like, hey, we deserve to be here. You need to get back to that. You need to go back and find that edge, because I feel like this team, being as close as they were a year ago, being as good as they were this past year, I feel like somewhere along the line, some of that edge has kind of dulled down a little bit. You've kind of lost some of that workman-like mentality, and you're really and truly buying into your own hype. You're really believing all these things that are being said about you. You guys are talking a lot about yourself. I just don't think you need to do that. I think you need to go back and just put the hard hats on and get the lunch pails and be that blue collar team that you want it to be. This really, to me, feels like that blue collar worker who all of a sudden gets promoted and promoted and promoted again, and now he's this front office guy, and you don't even know this guy anymore. He was your best friend. You guys would go out for beers on Fridays after you guys got done punching the clock, and now this guy's too busy drinking wine, wearing a suit and tie. All of a sudden, he's cleaned up and he's running around like he's a little bit better than you, and he's really the same old Joe. It's just he's got a different job now, and he's got a couple more dollars in his pocket. I feel like this team needs to go back to that hard hat mentality, that lunch pail, grind it out, gonna beat you up type of group, and just stop with all of the circus that kind of follows. I felt like this season alone had a whole lot of just extraneous stuff around it, right? There was talks about a revenge tour. There was talks about going out and basically trying to put a hurting on teams. I mean, you had the Dallas game. This team took the San Francisco game very serious, which it's fine to take it serious, but like you're not winning championships with those games. You have Amon Ra's podcast. You have other guys doing podcasts. The media availability is not really the issue. It's the things that are being said with the media availability, and it's the attitude that is kind of getting disseminated and proliferated with those things, and that's what's really bothering me.
Understood. No, it's one of those deals where there's a way to go about your business. There's a way to start talking and puffing your chest, and it maybe needs to take a little bit of a step back after you choke away the NFC Championship, and then you take a step back. But again, 15-2. A lot of people, which is crazy, when looking at the exploration of could the Lions beat the Eagles, said, hey, it's a 15-2 year. Look, it's a good year. We could compete. But they failed to recognize that I think the Eagles had, a great offensive line and a great defensive line that would have made it a tough game. It would have been competitive, and it would have been fun to see had both teams been healthy. But one team was. The Eagles were healthy, and you saw what they were able to do. And you hope that the Lions learned their lesson to say, hey, that you got to have, you got to have luck, and you got to have a lot of skill players. And hopefully they start to solve the problem of who's going to play opposite of Aiden, who's going to be contributors at the key spots, because unfortunately you got Derek Barnes with an injury coming back, and hopefully Ali McNeil by the end of the year will be a resemblance of what you expect him to be. But I'm curious to see how the Lions are going to shake out with their rebuild and how they get back to it, because there's no guarantee. That schedule is rough. Playoff teams on the road. Playoff teams and quarterbacks that are elite. You're going to face Lamar. You're going to face Joe Burrow. You're going to face you're going to face some quality opponents that are not going to care that you're the Detroit Lions. And so that road schedule is going to be tough, but we shall see how it plays out. And one thing, though, I do think that the coaching staff and what they're going to do to rebuild it, the hunger is going to be there. I feel like they know they're getting closer and closer. The hunger has to grow to the level where hopefully there is a payoff. Make sure you follow Adam on Twitter at AdamRSTROZ. Follow the network at Detroit Podcast. If you listened to anything today you agree, you disagree, if you think that, the Wings or the Pistons have a brighter future than what we're talking about, if you think the Tigers made the right call on Bregman, let us know. Hit us up at Detroit Podcast. We appreciate all the listens, all the fun aspects of doing this podcast with the interactions on social media. Thanks, everybody. Anywhere that you listen to your favorite audio content, just type in Detroit Sports Podcast, and our content will find you. Go USA, take down the Four Nations Cup. Let's make it a good game. And I believe the game is in the United States, so there's a great chance for some great antics and action. And let's see what goes on with another great sporting event. And we'll be back next week to break it all down. The world of Detroit sports, fully covered by Doc and Jock.
You fucking podcasters. I said don't let them in here.